China's president speaks with his Ukrainian counterpart for the first time since the war with Russia began. A US submarine is heading to South Korea as tensions on the Korean peninsula heat up. The suicide of a renowned artist sparks renewed debate over Taiwan's euthanasia ban. Plus, why does Taiwan have an enduring affection for Japan, its former colonizer? We find out. A warm welcome to TaiwanPlus News. I'm Yin Khvat. Chinese President Xi Jinping has urged his Ukrainian counterpart to negotiate with Moscow in the two leaders' first call since Russia invaded Ukraine. James Chater reports.
It's a phone call Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskyy has long wanted. Now, 14 months into war with Russia, he's finally spoken with his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping. Their call comes as fighting in Ukraine's east remains fierce. Xi has not denounced Russia's invasion, but urged Zelenskyy to negotiate with Moscow. Ukraine's leader said peace could not come at the expense of territorial losses.
Є можливість застосувати політичний вплив Китаю, щоб повернути силу принципам і правилам, на яких має триматися мир. Україна та Китай, як і абсолютна більшість світу, однаково зацікавлені у міцності суверенітету націй та територіальній цілісності.
Beijing has sought to portray itself as a peacemaker in the year-old conflict. But Xi's state visit to Moscow last month stoked Western suspicions over China's stated impartiality. China has purchased record amounts of Russian gas since the war began, limiting the impact of Western sanctions on Moscow. Following the Xi-Zelenskyy call, China said it would send a special envoy to Ukraine for peace talks.
中方将坚持劝和促谈，为尽快止战停火、恢复和平做出自己的努力。
China said it won't add fuel to the fire of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, but it will take more than words to assure Ukraine and the West that Beijing is a truly neutral party. Devon Tai and James Chater for TaiwanPlus.
The United States and South Korea have agreed the US can now deploy nuclear submarines in South Korean territory. It comes as the two countries' leaders met in Washington, D.C. and seek to bolster their defense cooperation over an increasingly hostile North Korea. Jaime Ocon reports.
Any attacks by North Korea will be met with a, quote, swift, overwhelming, and decisive response. That was the message from leaders of South Korea and the United States. The two countries have signed a landmark deal to allow U.S. nuclear-armed submarines to deploy in South Korea for the first time in 40 years. The deal was made as South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol met with his U.S. counterpart Joe Biden at the White House on Wednesday.
지금 전례 없는 복합 위기가 우리를 위협하고 있습니다. 한미동맹은 세계 평화와 번영에 기여하는 정의로운 동맹으로서 이러한 위기를 함께 극복해 나가고 있습니다.
Last year, North Korea tested a record 95 missiles, and it's believed the regime is also getting ready to conduct a 7th nuclear weapons test. In response, the US and South Korea have stepped up joint military drills, showcasing their own advanced fighter jets and nuclear-capable bombers. But during the meeting between the two leaders, President Biden highlighted that increasing cooperation was more than just a deterrent for North Korea.
We discussed our work together on promoting peace and stability in the Taiwan Straits, ensuring freedom of navigation in the South China Sea and beyond.
The U.S. has been boosting its military presence in Asia in light of China's increasingly aggressive actions in the region. Beijing has upped its threats to Taiwan, which it sees as its own, and has threatened to invade the country. Nations like Japan and South Korea are not only concerned about North Korea's actions, but also China's intentions with Taiwan.
In fact, one of South Korea's major shipping lanes directly transits through the Taiwan Strait. So we can see a clear relation between, Korean economic security, energy security, and, the security and peace of Taiwan Strait.
The U.S. and its allies are stepping up their combat readiness. and they're hoping to prove that their cooperation is enough to deter a conflict from sparking in the region. And the close friendship of Presidents Biden and Yoon means that for now, they're all singing the same tune. James Lin and Jaime Okan for TaiwanPlus.
Guatemalan President Alejandro Giammattei has given Taiwan's Vice President Lai Ching-te a jade mask. Giammattei presented the gift at a welcome banquet hosted by Lai in Taipei. The Guatemalan leader also visited an electric bus factory in the central city of Taichung. And he shared a cup of coffee with President Tsai Ing-wen at an event marking the start of Guatemalan Coffee Month. Giammattei is in Taiwan on a state visit, part of the country's efforts to shore up relations with its few remaining official allies. Taiwan is sharing real-time intelligence with the Five Eyes alliance of Western countries. That's according to Taiwan's national security chief, who had this exchange with lawmakers on Wednesday.
跟五眼联盟的这个所使用的这个情报的电脑系统，如果未来要进行情报的对接，尤其是这种即时性的情报的时候，是可以对接得上，
有保密性的，对，我们会透过保密性的系统。
那现在我们跟他们有没有实际进行情报的交换？
都有，
也是即时性的吗？
有。
Tsai was speaking with legislators about the National Security Bureau's efforts to prepare for Taiwan's upcoming national elections. He said the Bureau has been upgrading its computer equipment. This includes the ability to report and communicate with foreign countries. The Five Eyes alliance is made up of the US, the UK, Canada, Australia and New Zealand. Most of the grouping's members have moved to deepen relations with Taiwan in recent years, amid growing wariness of China. As tension across the Taiwan Strait escalates, Taiwan has developed underwater drones to confront Chinese submarines. Eric Gao has more.
Reports of Chinese warplanes flying close to Taiwanese airspace occur on an almost daily basis. But Taiwan also faces threats from the surrounding seas, including from enemy submarines. Whenever China deploys an aircraft carrier in the waters near Taiwan, there could be anywhere between 1 to 3 submarines alongside it. To help guard against potential underwater attacks, Taiwan has developed the Seawolf 400 submersible. The small, unmanned sub has applications that vary from reconnaissance to search and rescue to being used in kamikaze attacks against enemy ships. At 4 meters long, the Seawolf is more maneuverable than weapons like torpedoes or vessels like manned submarines. The sub was developed by Thunder Tiger Group. The company used to make unmanned vehicles like radio-controlled aircraft for hobbyists. But as tension between Taiwan and China has escalated, their production focus has shifted to defense.
过去大概10几年的时间都是做中小型的，给这个取代 diver 潜水夫去检测啊这些东西。可是我们希望说，那既然在稍微在近海，那我们可能需要做的更大的。那所以我们用4米的。那4米呢，我们想第一个它可以 carry 更多的科研设备，它的电子夹舱可以做很多的equipment 跟 diagnosis。那最重要的是，我们刚好最近这1年半，整个全球的政治经济的变化之后，我们认为我们也可以 contribute 这样的载具，来提供给我们的defense 的一个需求。
China has one of the world's largest submarine fleets, while Taiwan has only 4 of the vessels. Though Taiwan is speeding up the development of its domestic submarine program, in terms of sheer numbers, it will struggle to compete against China. But that's what makes the Seawolf so appealing to the Taiwanese military. At a relatively low production cost, the small vessel could effectively deter or attack enemy subs or ships.
政府也好，或者是我们的盟邦，像美国，他也建议我们尽量可以使用叫做不对称作战 （asymmetry warfare）。那 asymmetry warfare 实际上就是说，人家的潜舰是100亿，你这个小的 movable 的鲨鱼可能是500万，可是呢，你还是可以取到这个吓阻的作用。
While the Seawolf 400 is being utilized for national defense, its makers hope that future applications from the submersible will go beyond just military uses.
因应现在目前整个不管是国际情势或者是台海这个部分的一个关系，然后我们为了要将这个载具 做到它的规格能够做到军用等级，所以我们也朝向军民通用这样子的一个方向来发展。
Taiwan is also developing so-called suicide drones to fend off potential attacks from enemy ships. The military is now hoping that vessels like the Seawolf will be able to guard below the waters. Alex Chen, Sam Hui, and Eric Gao for TaiwanPlus.
Taiwan's semiconductor giant TSMC says it will start mass producing 2-nanometer technology by 2025. The company made the announcement Wednesday at its North America Technology Convention in California. The 2-nanometer chip is said to be 15% faster than the N3E 3-nanometer generation, which will enter mass production later this year. TSMC is fighting to stay ahead of its rivals. Intel plans to produce 2-nanometer chips in 2024 and Samsung in 2025. Tech giant Samsung says its semiconductor division lost $3.4 billion in the first quarter of the year. Operating profit for the company as a whole was also down more than 95% from last year. It's the worst profit report for the South Korean company in 14 years. The drop comes during rising global inflation and a decrease in consumer demand. Samsung announced plans to cut memory chip production earlier this month, but the company says it expects demand to recover in the second half of the year. Taiwan has been through multiple colonizers. The Dutch, the Japanese, and the Chinese all rule the island with an iron fist, yet some are remembered here more kindly than others. Bing Wang finds out why.
This is the Presidential Office of Taiwan, in the heart of the capital, Taipei. It's where the president and vice president work and where foreign delegations meet with high-level Taiwanese officials. The building was completed in 1919 by Japanese architect Yuheji Nagano during the 50-year period of Japanese rule of Taiwan.
It all started with the Japanese occupation era, which started in 1895. This presidential palace, when it began, it used to be a smaller scale residential property, and then over the years became the presidential palace.
The Japanese ruled Taiwan until 1945, when they were forced to give it up after losing World War II.
Initial Japanese rule involved ruling over Taiwanese subjects who didn't want to be ruled by the Japanese. So this is the first decade or two following 1895. There were a large number of revolts and insurrections against Japanese rule that were violently put down by the Japanese military.
By the third decade, the Japanese had built schools, hospitals, and developed infrastructure, beneficial vestiges that are still used today. This is Chidong Street, right in the capital of Taipei. It serves as a reminder of Japanese colonial rule over Taiwan, where these houses used to host civil servants and high-level officials from Japan. But the Japanese also left their mark in other ways, from the food Taiwanese people eat and the sports that are played.
The Taiwanese is deeply, profoundly influenced by the Japanese. The entire culture, not just the architecture, the city planning, the artwork, the history, all of the artistic treasures in the daily life are mainly like that.
But in 1949, a few years after World War II, Taiwan was flooded by some 2 million people from China. They were led by Chiang Kai-shek of the Kuomintang, or KMT, who lost the Chinese Civil War to the Communist Party. Thus began a 40-year period of oppressive rule known as the White Terror, when the KMT jailed dissidents and imposed Chinese culture and the Mandarin language.
Chiang Kai-shek's rule firsthand, and many of them have obviously very negative experiences living under the White Terror, living under a very brutal authoritarian regime. Many, I should say, much fewer people have experienced Japanese rule firsthand.
These days, government statistics show 60% of Taiwanese see Japan in a favorable light, and only 35% feel similarly inclined towards China. Taiwan is still working to reconcile its painful history, balancing nostalgia for its colonial Japanese past, with the wounds inflicted by more recent oppressors. The KMT is still a presence in Taiwanese society, and while debate rages over maintaining the monuments to its brutal legacy, there are fewer questions here about keeping the landmarks left by the Japanese. Andy Shi and Bing Wang for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up, the end of an era for Taiwan's COVID response task force. Details after the break.
For more colorful stories from here at the center of Taiwan and from around the world, download the TaiwanPlus app.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Taiwan's COVID task force held its last public meeting on Thursday. The group is disbanding after 3 years of handling the country's pandemic response. Eric Gao has this report.
It's the end of an era. After more than 1,200 days, Taiwan's pandemic response task force is finally closing its doors. It's been holding regular press conferences since January 2020, helping keep the country informed about the latest developments during the COVID-19 outbreak. But now that the pandemic situation has stabilized, the group's work is done.
那我想，虽然指挥中心解编之后，那我们还是会持续的这个监测相关的疫情。
Studies suggest Taiwan's public appreciates the task force's efforts. A recent poll shows over 70% of Taiwanese think the country's pandemic response was better than in other places.
除了我们指挥中心以外，那还有政府其他机构以外，我想都是全民一起努力出来的这个成果。
Former Health Minister Chen, who headed the task force for more than 2 years, showed up on its final day. He said it was a lot of hard work to keep Taiwan's pandemic under control.
其实背后里面包含很多的决策，里面决策也有痛苦，也有辛苦，也有辛酸，但是都代表我们对人民的负责。
And now, with its mission complete, the team is able to celebrate a job well done. Rick Yi and Eric Gao for TaiwanPlus.
The suicide of a renowned Taiwanese artist has sparked debate over euthanasia in Taiwan. John Van Trieste has this report.
A suicide that shocked Taiwan. After years of poor health, acclaimed sculptor Ju Ming took his life Saturday. He was 85 years old. But in addition to mourning Ju's loss, the case has also sparked a debate about euthanasia. Some, including lawmaker Wan Yuxia, say it's time for Taiwan to legalize the practice. Euthanasia isn't a new issue in the country. In 2018, sportscaster Fu Daren flew to Switzerland to end his life amid a fight with terminal cancer. He was also 85. Fu Sun says doctors were unable to stop his father's suffering. The health minister says dying patients can legally opt out of life-extending treatment. But he says euthanasia is different because a doctor has to be actively involved. Some doctors are also voicing concern over the issue.
如果真的通过了这个法案，那你真的要请医师来执行，医师还不一定会去，应该也有一个拒绝的权利啦。因为像如果说叫我来结束这个生命，说实在我们真的于心不忍。
Despite another round of discussion, Taiwan remains deeply split on whether legalizing euthanasia is something it can accept. Ethan Pan and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
The son of Taiwan's former president, Chen Shuibian, has been sentenced to 1 year in prison. Chen Zizong's final appeal over money laundering charges was rejected by Taiwan's highest court on Wednesday. The decision ends a case that has lasted for nearly 15 years. It is one of a series of corruption scandals from the former president's 8 years in power. The younger Chen was found to have helped hide illicit funds abroad. He will also be stripped of his position as a Kaohsiung city councillor for the ruling Democratic Progressive Party. Grammy award-winning musician Pras Michel has been convicted of conspiracy to influence the US government. Michel is a former member of the hip-hop group The Fugees. He was found guilty of attempting to influence the administration of former US Presidents Barack Obama and Donald Trump. Prosecutors say Michel tried to persuade the US to drop corruption investigations into disgraced Malaysian businessman Joe Low. They also say he lobbied the US government on behalf of Beijing to send Chinese billionaire and dissident Guo Wengui back to China. Michel faces up to 20 years in prison for the most serious charges. Thailand has successfully hatched Asia's first endangered vulture in captivity. The chick's caretakers are going above and beyond to make sure it has the best chance to survive, Eric Gao reports.
This may not be some people's idea of cute, but this face is the whole world to its dedicated caretaker. This is the first endangered red-headed vulture chick to be born in captivity in Asia. It's being raised in Thailand by a devoted zookeeper, but ideally, this chick will never know it.
นกอะครับมันลืมตาขึ้นมามันเห็นสิ่งใดก่อนมันก็จะคิดว่าสิ่งนั้นน่ะคือพ่อแม่มันหรือคือตัวมัน
To make sure this chick doesn't imprint on humans, Pang Bang Ya wears red gloves that look like an adult vulture to feed the chick. He feeds it 4 times a day, meaning he's never far away. He even sleeps outside the chick's enclosure. His efforts are focused on rebuilding the vulture population, which has declined because of hunting and habitat loss.
เราจะนำพญาแล้งที่ได้จำนวนมากพอเนี่ยกลับคืนสู่ธรรมชาติครับเราอยากจะเห็นก็คือการโบยบินกลับคืนมาของพญาแล้งในน่านฟ้าเมืองไทย
The zoo currently has 3 pairs of adult vultures. 1 pair has an egg they're incubating. The zookeepers are closely watching how the parents look after the egg in order to copy their example, all so they can be the best surrogate vulture parents they can be. Klein Wong and Eric Gao for TaiwanPlus.
There are currently around 60,000 visually impaired people in Taiwan, but there are only 33 working guide dogs in the entire country. These numbers fall far short of international standards, and it's an issue that's been going on for years. Sandy Chi has this story.
This is Yumi. She's not like other dogs that you might see on the streets. You should not pet her or play with her, as she is busy concentrating looking after her owner, Vito Lee. Vito is visually impaired. He relies on Yumi, a professionally trained guide dog, to get around. She's been guiding Vito for 3 years now. Over that time, the pair have formed an inseparable bond.
我觉得就像家人一样，对。那毕竟因为 Yumi 跟我在一起就是24小时都在一起，在家就我照顾他，但是出外走路的时候就是他照顾我。
Like Vito and Yumi, a guide dog's companionship and support can be life-changing for people with visual disabilities. There are over 60,000 visually impaired people living in Taiwan. But according to the latest statistics, the country only has 33 working guide dogs, and this number has barely changed in half a decade. The Ministry of Health and Welfare says the country needs at least 600 trained guide dogs to come anywhere close to meeting international standard. It takes 2 to 3 years to fully train a guide dog and costs over $32,000 each. It's not just high cost. The reasons behind the shortage are complex. Sunny Huang has been a guide dog trainer for 8 years. She says that training more working dogs would be a huge undertaking.
训练好一只导盲犬，它是需要很多时间去培养的。确实，我们人力也没有这么足，数量是没有办法说很大量的像机器这样制造出来，需要时间，需要人力。那人力的培养又是很困难的。
This guide dog shortage also hints at wider societal issues. Compared with other countries, Taiwan is considered less accommodating for visually impaired people.
我觉得台湾是需要有导盲犬的，因为台湾的路上的环境真的非常的复杂。无论是骑楼下面的停的机车，或者是凸出来的招牌等等，都是很容易让视障朋友撞到。使用手杖还是会有它的盲点，手杖会跟我们呈现一个45度斜斜的45度角。但是如果你走在路上， 刚好你的前面是有大货车、大卡车，你刚好手杖会伸下去它的底盘，但是你完全不知道你正前方就是可能是大客车的那种门啊，或者是后斗那种东西，那你就会迎面撞上。
In addition to confusing infrastructure and street layouts, the process for applying for a guide dog can be a daunting and difficult experience. Having a dog might also affect visually impaired people's ability to find work or look for accommodation.
使用导盲犬会面临到一些问题，第一个是求职的问题，求职，还有在住宿上面找房子。有些雇主方听到使用者他在用导盲犬，他不会明白的告诉你说狗狗不能进来，但是他会用其他的方式拒绝你，因为你有狗狗，他拒绝让你进来这个工作，或者是你有狗狗，他会用其他的方式拒绝你，让你去申请他的房子去承租。
Vito is lucky to have Yumi here to help him, but he's just one of many visually impaired people in Taiwan. And unless there are major changes in the current process, tens of thousands of others will never know how life-changing the aid and companionship of a guide dog can be. Aznaya Zhou and Sandy Chi for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching TaiwanPlus News. Finally today, we leave you with images of jaguars, capybaras, caimans and other wild animals in one of Colombia's nature reserves. I'm Yin Khvat. Take care and see you next time.